Number 11. Battle of Stalingrad. 2 million people fighting for a single city through 5 months of winter. The Battle of Stalingrad was the clash between German and Soviet forces for control of the industrial city on the Volga River. From August 1942 to February 1943, Nazis and Soviets fought house by house, street by street. The city became a frozen graveyard. Stalingrad cost over 2 million lives, military and civilian. It was the turning point of World War II in Europe. The Nazi defeat broke the backbone of the Wehrmacht and began the unstoppable Soviet advance toward Berlin. The battle was so brutal that soldiers fought over individual staircases for days. The life expectancy of a newly arrived Soviet soldier was 24 hours. Snipers became legends. Vasily Zaitsev alone killed over 200 enemies. Stalingrad wasn't just a battle. It was the moment when the Nazi war machine met something it couldn't break: absolute Soviet desperation. Number 10. Battle of Kalinga. The battle that turned a conqueror into a pacifist. The Battle of Kalinga was fought by Emperor Ashoka of the Mauryan dynasty against the independent kingdom of Kalinga in eastern India. Ashoka sought to unify the subcontinent. Kalinga refused submission. The result was an unprecedented massacre in ancient Indian history. Estimates suggest 100,000 died in battle, and another 150,000 civilians perished afterward from famine and disease. Rivers literally ran red. Ashoka won militarily, but was so horrified by the human cost that he renounced violence, converted to Buddhism, and spent the rest of his life promoting peace and compassion. Ashoka's edicts, stone pillars across India, record his remorse. One reads, "The sound of the war drum has been replaced by the sound of the drum of the law." It remains the most well-documented moral conversion in ancient history. Number 9. Battle of Tours. The day Europe almost became Islamic. The Battle of Tours was fought between Frankish forces led by Charles Martel and the Umayyad Muslim army that had already conquered the Iberian Peninsula. The Muslims advanced into southern France. Tours stood in their path. Charles Martel organized a desperate defense. The Frankish victory halted Islamic expansion into Western Europe. Historians still debate, if the Muslims had won, would Europe be Catholic today? Would the Renaissance have happened? Charles Martel earned his nickname, the Hammer. He literally crushed the invasion. The numbers remain uncertain. Islamic sources barely mention the battle. To them, it was a failed raid. To Europeans, it was apocalyptic. Some accounts claim 375,000 Muslims killed, exaggerated, but the psychological impact was real. Tours was less about blood and more about timing. A battle that shouldn't have mattered but changed the religious map of an entire continent. Number 8. Siege of Baghdad. When the Mongols erased the Islamic Golden Age in 2 weeks. The Siege of Baghdad was the Mongol conquest of the Abbasid Caliphate's capital. Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, led 150,000 Mongols against the most advanced city in the Islamic world. Baghdad had 500,000 inhabitants, legendary libraries, and unmatched wealth. In 2 weeks, the Mongols massacred between 200,000 and 1,000,000 people. The House of Wisdom, a library of hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, was destroyed. The Tigris River was said to have turned black with the ink of books thrown into it. The Islamic Golden Age ended there. While mosques burned, churches remained intact. The Caliph al-Mustasim was wrapped in carpets and trampled by horses, since Mongols believed royal blood should not be spilled. Baghdad was light. The Mongols brought darkness. Number 7. Battle of Waterloo. A name that became a synonym for final defeat for a reason. The Battle of Waterloo was Napoleon Bonaparte's final clash against British, Prussian, and Allied forces led by the Duke of Wellington. After escaping exile on Elba, Napoleon tried to retake France and Europe. Waterloo in modern Belgium was his last gambit. In a single day, the 18th of June, 1815, 47,000 men were killed or wounded. Napoleon lost and was exiled permanently to St. Helena. The Napoleonic Wars ended. Europe entered nearly a century of relative peace. The Congress of Vienna redrew borders that lasted for generations. Waterloo was decided by minutes. Napoleon delayed his attack until noon because the ground was soaked from the previous night's rain. When Blucher's Prussians arrived that afternoon, the tide turned. Had Napoleon attacked earlier, history might have changed. Number 6. Battle of Gettysburg. 3 days that determined whether America would be one nation or two. The Battle of Gettysburg was the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War. From July 1st to 3rd, 1863, Union forces faced Confederate General Robert E. Lee's army in Pennsylvania. It was the Confederacy's last major invasion of the North and the war's turning point. 51,000 casualties in 3 days. Gettysburg broke the Confederate momentum. Lee never mounted another offensive. The Union victory enabled Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation and eventually abolish slavery. Without Gettysburg, the United States might be 2 countries today. Gettysburg was where the Confederacy died, even if it took 2 more years to realize it. A battle so brutal that Lincoln consecrated the field as a national cemetery 4 months later. Number 5. Battle of the Somme. The deadliest day in British military history, and it was only day 1. The Battle of the Somme was a British and French offensive against German trenches in World War I. The plan seemed simple. Bombard the German lines for a week, then advance. Simple on paper, catastrophic in reality. On the 1st of July 1916, the first day, 19,240 British soldiers were killed. Over 141 days, more than 1 million men were killed or wounded on both sides. The Allied advance? 10 kilometers. It was the embodiment of trench warfare's futility. The preparatory bombardment failed. The Germans had bunkers 12 meters deep. When the shelling stopped, they emerged with machine guns and massacred British waves marching in straight lines. British officers watched helplessly as their men were cut down. The Somme wasn't a battle. It was an industrial meat grinder. Number 4. Battle of Berlin. 2.5 million soldiers fighting among the ruins of the Third Reich. The Battle of Berlin was the final Soviet offensive against Nazi Germany's capital. Stalin wanted Berlin before the Western Allies. Hitler, hiding in his bunker, ordered total defense. Children and the elderly were armed. The city became a suicidal fortress. In just 16 days, April 16th to May 2nd, 1,945, between 1.3 and 3.5 million people were killed, wounded, or captured. It was the most destructive urban battle in history. Hitler committed suicide on April 30. Germany surrendered unconditionally days later. World War II in Europe was over. But Soviet troops committed mass atrocities. An estimated 100,000 German civilians were killed, including thousands of women raped. Soviet soldiers were avenging Stalingrad, Leningrad, and 27 million dead compatriots. Berlin paid the price of Nazism. Berlin was the Götterdämmerung. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12, ending in radioactive ruins and corpses in the streets. Number 3. Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days when humanity came closest to nuclear extinction. Technically not a battle, but the most dangerous military standoff in history. The Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. Kennedy blockaded the island. Khrushchev sent ships with more missiles. The world held its breath. Had war erupted, estimates say 200 million would have died in the first hours, followed by nuclear winter and civilizational collapse. Disaster was avoided by inches. Soviet submarines nearly launched nuclear torpedoes. One officer, Vasily Arkhipov, said no. He saved the world. We only learned this decades later. At the time, the public had no idea how close it was. Kennedy and Khrushchev negotiated secretly. The Soviets withdrew missiles from Cuba, the US from Turkey. Both declared victory. Both lied. Both knew how close they'd come to destroying everything. Number 2. Siege of Jerusalem. When Rome wiped the Jewish nation off the map for 1,878 years, the Siege of Jerusalem was Rome's response to the Great Jewish Revolt. Emperor Vespasian sent his son Titus with 4 legions to crush it. Jerusalem held out for 5 months. Rome showed no mercy. Over 1 million Jews were killed by massacre, famine, and crucifixion. The Second Temple was destroyed. Only the Western Wall remained. The Jewish nation was dispersed across the world. The diaspora began, lasting nearly 2 millennia until 1948. Titus actually tried to spare the temple. He knew its religious value. During the final assault, a Roman soldier threw a burning torch. The temple caught fire. Historian Josephus wrote, Jerusalem in AD 70 wasn't just a city falling. It was the end of a nation, the scattering of a people, and the start of 19 centuries of exile. Number 1. Battle of Hastings. The day England stopped being Saxon and became Norman. The Battle of Hastings was fought between Harold Godwinson, Saxon King of England, and William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed the English throne. Harold had just repelled a Viking invasion in the north. William landed in the south. Harold marched 400 kilometers in 4 days to meet him. Exhausted, Harold was killed, supposedly by an arrow to the eye. 10,000 men died in 1 day. William became king. The Saxon aristocracy was replaced by Normans. Modern English was born from the fusion of Anglo-Saxon and Norman French. English culture, law, and architecture changed completely. William almost lost. The Saxon shield wall was nearly impenetrable. The Normans faked a retreat. The Saxons broke formation to pursue. It was a trap. Norman cavalry slaughtered the scattered soldiers. A centuries-old tactic decided a nation's fate. Hastings was quick, brutal, and final. A one-day battle that reshaped England forever.